All right, I'm just going to stand here because your speakers has got the sound now. So I just want to test online. Can everybody just confirm that online everybody can hear us? Just the thumbs up will be great. Great, excellent. So you can hear us and you can see Brent's presentation. Wonderful. Okay, great. I think everybody is coming back. I think just grabbing coffee. Okay, we'll just give it 2 more minutes, then we'll start. Just grab coffee. Like in cold, it's not warmer. Yeah, I've got the 24 is normally nice and
I said I only do 3 coffees a day.
Yeah.
My words are already. Well, I was like a little bit jittery.
Okay, it's just 2 ladies waiting for coffee, but I think I'm going to start so long. So I hope everybody is feeling a bit refreshed after some coffee and some snacks. And now this is the nice part of the meeting. I would like to introduce Brent Lindeque to all of our members. I'm very privileged to have him here today. He is a lead SA hero and one of Africa's most promising entrepreneurs, also chosen as one of the prestigious Mail and Guardian top 200 young South Africans. His small act of kindness spawned hundreds and thousands of similar videos, reaching and physically improving millions of lives, and in addition, creating 3 dedicated feeding schemes in Canada, the USA, and Ireland that are still running to this day. Good Things Guy is on a mission to change what the world pays attention to. We believe that there is good news all around us, and over 1 million readers a month agree with us. We hunt down and report the best good news stories from South Africa and the world. So we're very delighted to have Brent with us today. Thank you, Brent, for your time.
Thank you.
And we look forward to your presentation.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. All right, so my name is Brent Lindeque. They call me the Good Things Guy. We're going to get into that in a little bit, how I got that title. But today, I'm here to share a story with you that I call changing the narrative. And the reason for that is because this thing that happened to me a couple of years ago changed my narrative, my internal narrative of what was happening in South Africa and the world. And it gave me a different outlook to what was happening in our country. It's almost like a superpower that I have now, that I can see the good things happening around us. And I want to share that with you, because the reality is this: when we change our internal narrative, our external narrative starts to change as well. I call it change one thing, change everything. That bio is a little bit old. I need to update it. Right now, our little website, and I say our because it's become a full news site that employs staff that write good news every day, journalists that are seeking out these good news stories. On a good month, we have over 2.5 million readers a month, which is an insane number. Like to try to think that 2.5 million people are coming to get this good news. What I can say, I've been doing this for 8 years now, and the stories that we find, they all have a common thread. It's one idea, one act of kindness, one seed that creates more good. And those are the stories that we tell every single day. During COVID and the pandemic, I did a lot of these talks where I got up and I spoke about the good things happening in the country. And for the first time in my career, I got a lot of kickback where people would say, Brenty, come on, it's not sunshine and rainbows, it's not good things. Living in South Africa is incredibly tough. So I'm going to start with the bad news today, which is the polar opposite. But I need you to understand that I know what's going on in our country, and I'm not like an ostrich with my head in the sand. I'm not just all about the good things. I do know what's happening in our country. In South Africa, we face so many challenges before COVID, challenges every single day. In 2019, a group of researchers got together and they came up with this idea, this number, this percentage of what a South African would need to earn in order to live with what they deemed a level of dignity. If I had to ask in the room, I mean, you don't have to shout it out if you don't want to, but what percentage do you believe in South Africa, percentage of people, live with a level of dignity? Because that's very low. Pessimist in that corner. The reality is 10%. It's 10%. 90% of the country live below the level of dignity. And in that 90%, over 40% live in extreme poverty, which means that about 4.5 million kids go to bed hungry every single night. Poverty is a huge problem in our country. Crime, good God, the crime is out of order. 3 years ago, the police commissioner stood up and he gave all those stats that he does every year. And he said that our murder rate per day 3 years ago was a little over 30 people a day. 30 people a day. A year later, 2 years ago, that number went up to 60. In 2022, the amount of people that are being murdered in South Africa every single day is 72. It's worse than the war in Ukraine, for perspective. Then we speak about other problems, crime, corruption, politicians, inflation. If you follow me, you'll know I've got a huge problem with the Woolworths bags. I'm not speaking about that, the price of Woolworths bags. Inflation is tough. It's super tough. I filled up my car over the weekend and I think it was 2,500 rand for petrol. Are you joking? All of these things, load shedding, the crime, all of these things, it all sort of came into a position a year and a half ago where it almost waterfalled into this thing that happened, the looting and the rioting that took hold of South Africa. On that Sunday, the key word that was trending over that period was helpless. As South Africans, we felt helpless. I'm going to stop with the bad news now. I'm going to move on from that. So this really cool thing with having this amount of readers is that I'm able to actually have a look at how the country's feeling on any given day. It's the craziest thing. When we're good, when we're happy, when we're in a lekker sort of space, we're open to good news. When we're not, when we're going through tough times, we don't want to hear about good news in this country, which is a weird thing, right? You would think that if you're happier, your go-to would be to get good news. It's very serendipitous that I'm speaking to you at this time of the year, because what I've found over the last 8 years is every October, November, our website stats dip, but badly, like properly. I like to say in Afrikaans, we can really depict things a lot better using Afrikaans words. And during this time, this October, November, the only word that I can explain is mug. We're all mug, or maybe even gatvol. It's a great one. We've worked really hard. I mean, the last couple of years have been tough, but every year you work really hard. And this time of the year is when you're fighting towards that family time, summer holidays, that time in South Africa that we all love. An interesting thing about news, and I'm going to teach you these tidbits along the way, but as human beings, we only have the capacity to care about news really for about 72 hours. And then we move on to the next thing. So what I'm going to show you, there's 3 case studies that I have of the sentiments of the country and how, even though we're going through traumatic things, we're able to do one thing that lights a match and changes the situation in the country. So in 2017, South Africa was being very argumentative around the dinner table, around the water coolers, wherever you were sort of speaking to people on social media, people were just arguing with each other. A young South African, weird, he was from Cape Town, but he called himself the Joe Burger, which is a bit of an odd thing. He took to social media and he put this one post up. Okay, black people, ask white people one question you always wanted to know. Does anybody remember that? Yeah. That conversation immediately changed the sentiment of the country. We moved from being argumentative to laughing at each other. All of a sudden, English people were asking Afrikaans people questions. Bloemfontein was asking Kimberley questions. It was really funny. We were laughing at ourselves. In 2018, there was a young couple who took an off-ramp in the east of Johannesburg. No one knows what occurred that horrible evening. But we woke up the next morning, and this young couple had been burnt to a crisp in the back of their bakkie. No one knows why. No one knows why it was so violent. About 2 weeks later, a young Cape Townian was driving into the CBD from out of the city, and she was making her way in, and she sort of saw that she was running out of fuel. She stopped at a petrol station, said to the petrol attendant, please just put in $100, and when she went for her handbag, she realized that she didn't have a purse with her. So she said to the petrol attendant, don't worry about it, stop whatever you're doing, I'll make it to the office, I'll get some money there, I'll get petrol on the way home. The petrol attendant said to her, no ma'am, it's not safe for a woman to be on the roads, especially without fuel. I'm going to give you $100 out of my own pocket, and you can give it back to me on your way home this afternoon. She was so taken aback by this kindness, she said to him, can I please leave my license with you? Can I give you something? And he said to her, no ma'am, I trust you. She got to the office, she took to social media, she told her little following about this story. I think it took 24 hours to raise R1 million for that petrol attendant. South Africans collectively put their hands in their pockets to thank this man who had changed the sentiment of our country. In 2019, around this October, November time, again, there was this conversation that was happening. It happens all the time. I like to say, it's 2022, we can identify as anything we want to, right? You could be a tree if you wanted to. Now, my pronoun is that guy who is 29. If you tell anybody any different, I'll say you're lying. The reason I say that is because for 29 years, my entire life, we've had this conversation around the dinner tables at school, my colleagues, the immigration chat. It's weird. South Africans are always talking about leaving. We're this country that always has a plan B in our back pocket. Where are we going to go? Australia? I don't think so. In 2019, it was happening again. Our WhatsApp groups were growing smaller. People were leaving. It did feel like it was a mass exodus. A Cape Townian by the name of Jared Petzer took to social media, put up a post, and he said, I'm not going anywhere, I'm staying. Creating one of the biggest social media movements that South Africa has ever seen. Millions of people joined this group to say, I'm proudly South African, I'm not going anywhere. Again, changing the sentiment of the country. I'm not so sure about the group now. There's a lot of untoward things that have been put in the newspapers, but the intentions were good at the start, I think. 2020 and 2021, we skipped the sentiment of the country because we were all a little bit of a mess, I think. In 2022, it's happened again. Rob Hersoff, he came out on Biz Community. My mom has sent me this about 47 times. I don't know about him. I don't know about New South Africa, but it's definitely delivering hope again in a time when we can feel like we're hopeless. So I love this quote. It's one of my favorite quotes to always go back to. It's attributed to Fred Rogers, and it says, in times of tragedy, when you look for the helpers, because they will always be there. It actually wasn't Fred who said this. Fred had a show in the 1970s in America called The Neighborhood. It was this TV show. This quote actually comes from his mom, and it was 30 years before that. She told him, don't worry if you're scared about what's happening in the world, because the helpers will always be there. I like this quote for two reasons. One, it kind of shows us that the world has always been a scary place. For reals, for many years. The second is because it is 100% absolutely true. The only reason Good Things Guy exists is because we tell the stories of the helpers. My team, on a bad day, on a Monday, when we get together for an editorial chat, they'll be like, oh my God, did you see what happened over the weekend? And I'll be like, relax, give it an hour or two. The helpers will be there and we'll report on those stories. So if we cast our minds back to the looting and the rioting, that Sunday, when we all felt so helpless, the very next day, a video went viral. Anybody remember this? Right, so I'm going to set this up. Context, for those that don't. I can see you giggling. They were sliding. So the manager of the ShopRite in this mall in KZN called the Tugela Ferry Mall. It was scary. People were breaking into the shops. They were stealing stuff. It's like, what do? You want to protect your job? You want to help you? What's going on? What do? He screamed at his colleagues, grab the cooking oil! They thought he was nuts. Maybe because cooking oil is so expensive. I don't know. But he said to them, take that cooking oil and spray it all over the floor. Make a layer of cooking oil on the floor. All of a sudden, the looters and the rioters were slip sliding all over the place. And if you've seen this video, you can't actually watch it because it shakes up this. The guy was laughing so much when he took the video, it changed the sentiment of our country. We weren't so scared anymore. We were laughing at a really tragic situation. A story that we reported on happened that same week. A young couple were meant to get married that weekend, the following weekend after the riots and the looting. The wedding venue phoned them and said, unfortunately, there's no way that we can open the doors. It's just too dangerous. It's right outside. It's not going to happen. The young couple, obviously distraught. The first thing they said is, what about the food? We've ordered all the food. Can we come down to the venue and package that food and give it to the homeless and the needy? They packed over 1,000 meals. I don't know how much food they ordered or how many guests were coming to their wedding. But they did good during a time that was quite tragic. Then there were the helpers. This is one of my favorite photos from that time. Someone got dressed up in a superhero outfit and was there helping to clean up South Africa. The hashtag was Rebuild SA. A 19-year-old girl from Johannesburg. Let's say Jehovah's Witness. 19-year-old girl from Johannesburg took to a group called I Know a Guy. I Know a Guy is a business sort of community group. You can sort of log on there and say, I've only got $500. Can someone help me with a logo? And that's really what it's about. I think it was on the Tuesday. She took to the group and she said, I don't have varsity tomorrow. I have time in my hands. I would love to help rebuild SA. That's where that hashtag came from. And it was real. All of a sudden, South Africans were rolling up their sleeves and physically getting involved to try and rebuild the country, changing the sentiment. That's why I'm here today, to talk about this other narrative. I call it the superpower, where you can start to see the good in every situation, because it really is there. But I think in order to get to how I got this idea to be able to see different narratives, we've got to understand how I got this title, The Good Things Guy. So 8 years ago, there was this thing happening. It started down in Australia. I've got nothing against them. I know I've mentioned it twice. It started down in Australia, and it was called neck nominations. Does anybody in the room remember neck nominations? So neck nomination was the first real viral trend to use social media as a catalyst to grow itself. With a simple concept, to neck means to drink alcohol as much as possible. Do something really stupid in the process. I'll put up the thing so you can see. This guy that pops up here in this corner, he's holding goldfish in a glass, 2 goldfish. He swallowed those goldfish, and then drank half a bottle of gin, and then looked at the camera and nominated 2 or 3 people to outdo what he'd done. There were millions of these videos being uploaded from around the world. Like I said, started in Australia, was sweeping the globe. I was watching it from here in South Africa, January 2014. And 2 things were going through my mind, 2 major sort of themes. The first is, why weren't we being more responsible with what we share online? We know that now. I think as a country and the world, we've learned. If you wouldn't want it on the front page of a newspaper, you don't put it on your social media. The second is, why weren't we using our following, our social media, to try and do some good? Even if it was a small following that we had, why weren't we inspiring those followers to be kind and do good? So I remember it just like yesterday. I got to the office, opened up my computer, and there was a notification, I've been nominated by a friend of mine. When I got the nomination, I thought to myself, what do I do? I'm not afraid of drinking. Pre-COVID, you would find me at Billy's on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and a Sunday. No problem. It's now a pick and pay clothing store. A little bit weird. What do I do? Do I join the game because it's really easy? Or do I try and inspire kindness to my 50 followers? I grabbed a work colleague and we went off to our local fruit and veg city, and I got an extra sandwich, a chocolate and a cold drink with the intention to give it to the next person in need. Not difficult. Like I said, the poverty stats in our country are harrowing. I threw my phone at Nikki, my colleague, and I said to her, capture this, which she did. Got back to the office, started uploading the first YouTube video I'd ever put up. I had to register YouTube, didn't even know what it was. I put the video up, and within a couple of minutes, it shot to 301 views. That number specifically. I thought I'd made it. I was like, what? This is insane. What I didn't know at the time is the number stopped there at 301. When things started going viral on YouTube, that was like the counter stopped, and then they would check to make sure the video wasn't anything untoward. That night I went to a friend's birthday dinner and she said to me, Brenty, I'm so proud of you. I can't believe what you've done. You've had 10,000 views on that video, and there's all these videos that are popping up from around the world of people that have changed their neck nomination to a rack nomination. Random acts of kindness. The next morning I woke up and the video had hundreds and thousands of views, and I had all these missed calls on my phone from international numbers. I have no idea how they got my number, but it was CNN and BBC and Sky News and all these big news stations that wanted to tell the story of how an average South African managed to change a global game from drinking to kindness. I want you to watch this video. I don't know if the sound's going to play, but we can only hope.
I noticed it's getting really cold out here.
Yeah.
My dad actually got me this jacket. I hope that keeps you warm tonight, mate.
The moment that went viral proved that even the smallest acts of kindness go a long way.
A local woman is going viral this week for doing something so simple but so good.
Random act of kindness isn't going unnoticed.
There's still a lot of good in this world.
I hope a lot more people can do acts of kindness for other people, because you never know what it's going to do for their day, for their life. You never know what situation they're in.
Thank you so much, man. We're really proud of you guys in South Africa for having started this.
In South Africa?
They are performing random acts of kindness.
10,000 rands worth of shoes.
I was inspired by a guy I saw in South Africa.
What inspired me was a guy in South Africa.
He filmed himself giving some sandwiches and food to someone standing at a robot.
This was inspired by a YouTube video from Brent. Yours, not mine.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
I'd like to thank Brent Lindeque for this nomination.
Go watch Brent's video.
Brent's video.
Brent Lindeque.
Brent Lindeque.
I'm going to show you how South Africans do it.
This is just awesome. I was very, very proud, but never realized where it was going to. Never.
I can't honestly tell you I believe that it will blow up and be as big and great and reach millions of people. And what this journey has exposed is this ripple effect. We underestimate our individual roles in creating those ripples. I knew that he had done something special.
For you, buddy. Thank you. Hold on. Chocolate. And a Coke. Cheers, buddy. Thank you.
I'd never put anything like that on the internet before, and it's changed my whole existence on this planet. It showed me my purpose.
Brent Lindeque is in the studio with us.
It made me who I am today. Isn't that bizarre? The greatest thing I've ever done in my whole entire life is fed a homeless person.
People want to do good. They just need the platform.
We rise by lifting each other. It takes one small thing to make a big difference.
So, a couple of things. I say in that video that the greatest thing I ever did was feed a homeless person. I think the greatest thing I ever did was cut off the top knot. It was a terrible 3 years of my life. There's no many near top knots, we're okay. The second is maybe you recognize my fiance. We were on a cooking show together called My Kitchen Rules Season 1. Everybody remembers him. No one remembers me. I'm quite forgettable, which is terrible. The third is I do many talks, and this video was created as an ad for a banking thing in South Africa. And whenever I watch that ad, it's like I'm watching someone else's life story. Because I never planned any of this. I didn't plan for my life to change. I fed a homeless person, and I now own what is South Africa's biggest good news platform. The story behind that is the very next day, my social media started growing, and all of a sudden, charities, businesses, individuals that were doing good in South Africa were getting hold of me because they wanted their story told. They wanted the good things to be shared on a bigger platform. For the first time in my 29 years, I realized there was good things happening in our country by the bucket load. So I did what any sort of young, naive person with no journalism skills whatsoever would do, and I stalked Gareth Cliff. I'm not even joking. I really did. So Gareth had interviewed me during the Nick nomination, Rack nomination thing on 5FM. And then like a couple of months later, he left and started Cliff Central. And I knew that this was really a maverick in its time. He is a maverick. He's such a great guy, and this great concept to tell local stories on a global platform. So I approached him. I followed him to clubs and all sorts of places until I could get his email address. And I set up a meeting with him and Rena Broomberg. And the whole concept was to tell those stories, to tell the good news stories from South Africans, so that other South Africans could start to feel like me and start to realize that good things were happening in our country. They gave me a job. It was a Thursday. I started on the Tuesday. It was the first radio show or radio anything that I'd ever done. It was possibly the worst piece of content I've ever put on or out there. It's still available. Things that live on the internet die on the internet. But I got better, and I learned that everybody's got a story to tell, and everybody's story is incredibly important. The only thing that we need to really do is listen. So I let people tell their stories. So much so that the good stuff on Cliff Central became one of the top downloaded podcasts. I then got headhunted, moved to Jacaranda. I was there for another 3 years, and from there I moved to Power Media, who I'm with now. While I was at Cliff Central that first year, I sort of came to the realization that yes, podcasting was great, but 8 years ago it was really niche. It might even still be niche now. I don't know how many people listen to podcasts on a daily basis. I wanted these stories to be told so that my grandmother could read them, so that people on the street could read them. So on the 1st of August 2015, I launched goodthingsguy.com. I like to say that first day I had one reader, my mom, who met her in the package, my biggest fan. By the end of the day, I doubled my readership because she showed it to my father. So I was on a good wicket. 7 years later, and we have 2.5 million readers a month. Like that number, when I say it out loud, it doesn't make sense. I fed a homeless person, and now I've got 2.5 million people that come and pick up on the good news. So a lot of the time, when I do these talks, people have asked me, what's the one story that really hit me in the feels? And it's sort of stayed with me. And it's one of the first stories I ever really published or wrote about. The quote, it leads directly into that because it's all about purpose and passion. When we do things for purpose or with our passion, it changes what we're doing. So Andy Loughton is this incredible South African who runs a soup kitchen down in Somerset West. This story, I don't even know what the date is. It's 2016, 2015 is when the first time we wrote about him. Andy was driving into work the one day, his work, feeding 300 people. And on his way there, he thought to himself, why am I feeding people? I get that unemployment is tough. I get that they don't have jobs. I get that they're hungry. But what is the real thing behind it? And he realized that they didn't have a purpose. Without a job, you don't really have a purpose. So he stopped at a grocery store and he bought garbage bags with the idea to give these human beings purpose. When he got to the soup kitchen, he said, right, today I'm not just feeding you, today you're going to work. You're going to go out and clean Somerset West. Come back with 1 bag, you get a meal. Come back with 2, but you clothe them. We wrote that story, and this story went more viral than I did. It was insane. This, for me, was the moment I realized how much South Africans needed good news, how much they needed that balance. I've revisited his story a couple of times. Andy has created what I like to call his own economy. He works with coins so that inside his economy, it can't be used on drugs or alcohol. But he's got vegetable gardens that you can work in. He's got accommodation. He's got charity shops. He's got his own little economy. Municipalities in South Africa have visited him to try and replicate what he's done in different areas. They can't. They don't have his passion and purpose. My grandmother used to say, and this is where we're going to all learn together, because I've learned some things about journalism. I'm now a journalist, odd that, but I've learned a couple of things along the way that I'd like to teach you about changing the narrative. So my grand used to say there are always 3 sides to a story. His, hers, and the truth. We all know that saying. In journalism, there are 100 sides to a story. And as impartial as we're meant to be, we're not. I will always find the good things when it comes to a story, and majority of journalists, not because they're trying to find the bad, but because the bad is a reality in our country. And when you're going to journalism school, there's a thing that says, if it bleeds, it bleeds. So the harder the news is, the more you're going to get clicks and sell whatever articles it is. So I'm going to teach you a couple of tricks here. In the newsroom, there is a person who gets paid a lot of money just to craft the headline. That's their job. This headline specifically, so there's two words here that are problematic, but they will make you click or buy whatever that story is. The first is your political party. It doesn't matter what political party you put in the headline, there's going to be someone who likes it and someone that don't. So you already got someone interested. The last word here is the clicking word, divided. Why are you divided? What side am I on? What side are you on? I want to know the story. So the story is this. In 2019, there were these protests that were happening in our universities. This one in particular, the protesters may have been wearing a red shirt. We don't know if they were politically affiliated to anyone. This headline decided to feed that to you, as that was the story. They were very angry, and they were protesting, and no one was listening, and people were sort of not caring, so they took the rubbish and they threw it out. This kid walked past, Eckhart Binding, they called him the trash kid, eventually. What a title. Walked past, picked up the rubbish and put it back in the bin. Protesters, angry, took the rubbish and threw it out again. So Eckhart stood there and put it back in the bin. The people that were watching the protest happen took out their phones and started videoing and taking photographs of what was happening, and that's how it became front page news. We told the same story. Eckhart Binding, the trash kid, starts an incredible initiative to unite South Africa. Unite is the polar opposite of divide. Why? Well, when he started going viral, all the people in the comment sections, like with the petrol attendant, wanted to give him money, to thank him for being such a, I don't know, kind person to our environment. Eckhart said, thank you, so kind of you, but I don't need the money. I come from a privileged background. My parents have looked after my varsity fees. I would like to take that money, though, and start developing a tool, an app, what I'm studying, to translate any sentence, paragraph, words into any one of our South African languages, because that doesn't even exist on Google Translate yet, because we've got so many South African languages. Eckhart is still working on that today. Same story, two totally different sides. So this is crazy, because, like I said, I feel like I'm living someone else's life story. What you do matters. It has a greater impact than we will ever understand. Every choice we make has got this ripple effect, which is absolutely insane. So in 2019, I told this very silly story. Not silly, it's just a little feel-good story. A group of under 9 little kids were going out to play rugby from all different nationalities, one school. And just before they went out, they huddled together and sang the most passionate war cry. Like all the gears. I like to say when I see videos like that, it gives me all the feels. I actually had a reader email me the other day and ask me to please stop using that phrase. They were like, it's done. You can't get all the feels for everything. I told him to shut up. In 2019, News 24 was 21 years old. They weren't concentrating on good news. They were concentrating on the hard-hitting stuff. And let me make this clear. News 24 are an incredible organization. What they do is so damn important. To know what's going on in our world, we have to read the bad news. We have to know what's going on, right? But in 2019, for the first time, they started concentrating on good news. We got tagged in a tweet about an hour after that story went out, and it also gave them all the feels. Not saying it's a coincidence, but about a week later, so in the news cycle, if you get an exclusive story, it's really cool. Because that means you carry that content yourself for maybe an hour or two until someone else picks it up, gets hold of the organization or the person and rewrites that story in their own voice. So we got this exclusive story about a Joburg couple that had gone down to Durban. They'd had this itinerary that was jam-packed for the full week they were there. And every moment they had something planned. The first night, they were just so exhausted they decided to eat at the restaurant, stay at the restaurant in the hotel. The waiter, Murphy, what a great guy, I got to interview him, was so hospitable and so kind, and he made them feel so lekker that they decided to scrap the rest of the week and just do dinner at the hotel every single night. Every single night they tipped him really well, but on that final night, they gave him a 5,000 rand tip with a 777 rand bill. victim. Good news. The real story, the real crux of the good news there is Murphy said to them, thank you, I appreciate this. But I'm going to take this 5,000 rand and I'm going to split it with all the waiters on the floor. Because we rise by lifting each other. Same words as Nelson Mandela. And he did really say that. Like, I interviewed the couple, it was real. We wrote that story, and about an hour after that, it appeared on News 24. But it didn't just appear, it was copied verbatim. It was an odd conversation to phone the editor of News 24 and explain what plagiarism is. Super odd. They went on, so News 24 launched the Feel Good section in 2019, which is one of the best things they could have ever done, because it delivers balance to their readership that they already have. It's very important. Beginning of the year, we told this story, Darren Thomas. Darren Thomas used to live in Joburg. He's now 38 years old. When he was 17 years old living in Joburg, he now lives in Cape Town, he woke up in the middle of the night to this noise inside his parents' house. So he got up. There were 2 intruders in the house. He tried to fight them off. A gun went off, shot him in the spine, and he's paralyzed from the waist down. That's not his story. He's gone on to do really great things. He's actually the face of Biogen, the athlete performance stuff. And during COVID, he did all these athletic feats, where the one was he did a rope climb in his chair, like to the top of it. He's really talented. The story that we wrote at the beginning of the year, his wife and his kids had left the house. And the photo that you see there is from CCTV footage. He was at home and he heard a big splash. So he went outside and his massive dog, I think it's a Rottweiler, I'm not sure, it's a huge dog, was in the deep end of the pool. He couldn't pull the dog out because he doesn't have the core to do that. He would have pulled him into the pool and they would have been in a worse off situation. So he bent over and he moved the dog's paws just inch by inch. And then moved his chair and the dog's paws and the chair, until he got the dog to the shallow end and the dog got out the pool. I wrote that story because it gave me all the feels. It was such a lekker video. I'm a dog person, obviously. A couple of hours later, that same story was featured in the Mail Online. I fed a homeless person. I'm creating news that is being shared on a global platform. Changing the narrative, change one thing, you literally change everything. So much so that I now write for News 24. It's ridiculous. All right, so I'm going to leave you with a couple of feel-good stories. Some of them, the first slide that we'll get to, you know these people, you know these faces. Tuli Madonsela has become one of my closest friends. She's really an incredible human. I got to interview her a couple of months ago, and I asked the Good Things Guy readers, I said, what is the one question that you would ask Tuli? You were sitting down with her. About 1,300 people said, when are you going to become the president? When are you going to become the president? So sitting down with her, I said to her, tell me, that people want to know. And she said to me, Brenty, I'm one person. I'm only one person that can affect change. I would much rather take up this role as head of faculty for the Law Society at Stellenbosch and impact thousands of future leaders of tomorrow. Let them take that torch and really create change in our country. That's beautiful leadership. I've ever seen it. Dr. Suleiman from Gift of the Givers, we know him. In the last 30 years, his foundation has raised 4.5 billion rand. Yes, that's the correct number. Every cent is accounted for and has gone to the organizations and charities that it needs to go to. Nothing has gone into the back pocket. When I spoke to him, and when I do speak to him, I saw him last week at an event, and he stood up and he was talking about what is it? What is going to change South Africa and make us better? How do we change the narrative of our country? His answer, you. It's up to every single South African to take that thought and to move us forward. It's the people who don't pay for cool drinks when they get stopped by traffic officers. That's where the change starts. Grassroots. One of the things he said, which has stuck with me, is we need to make our walls lower and our tables lower. We need to start helping more South Africans. Carolyn Steyn, so in 2014 it started. She was at a lunch in Zelda Lagrange, Nelson Mandela's former. She was sitting and she said to Carolyn, what are you going to do for Nelson Mandela Day? You have to do something. You have to do something. So Carolyn said, I'm going to crochet 67 blankets. 67 for Nelson Mandela. She started crocheting, and by February, March, she realized how hard it is to get to 67. So she put out a call onto social media. Thousands of people said, we will help you. We will knit these blankets, we'll crochet them, we'll get them to you. Since then, I think she's broken 4 world records with her crocheting every year. She gets hundreds and thousands of these blankets donated. They create some sort of portrait that you can see from space. It's quite crazy. Nelson Mandela's face, the Springboks, they come up with something every year. And then they uncrochet those blankets, so they're separate again. And they go deliver them to people in need in South Africa to keep them warm during winter. She's also one of the only people in South Africa to start a program in our correctional facilities. Carolyn Steyn herself went into, I think it's called Waterzonderboom something out there in Cullinan, the prison, and sat with the prisoners to teach them how to crochet. So they can help people outside of the prison while helping themselves at the same time. Those are the people we know, right? But there are so many stories of people that we just don't know. The ordinary South Africans that are doing extraordinary things. Have you heard of Ladles of Love? It's a feeding scheme in South Africa. So this man over here, Danny, in 2019, when we were all feeling that gees of the World Cup, we were getting closer to the final, it was happening, the Springboks were going to do it. I think we all felt it this weekend when we were watching. Danny said, what about the homeless people? How can't they feel the gees that we do? They're humans as well. Just because they don't have money, they can't be proud. So they put together what is the first that I've ever heard of homeless viewing World Cup party. He put the call out on social media. He was like, I want to do this. Screens got donated. I think Debonair's were the official pizza provider. There was also beer. Can we not talk about that? And he gave them the best goddamn day. From that, Ladles of Love got its name. And he started his soup kitchen, I think, started with 30 people. He's now feeding over, I think, 1 million people a month. A simple idea. Jenna Lowe, the beautiful young lady to the top, to your left, my right. So Jenna started one of the biggest campaigns in our country to change organ donation. The video went viral. She put out this video where she invited the whole of South Africa to her 21st. Every single person was invited. The only way that you could get on the invite list was if you signed up as an organ donor, because Jenna needed new lungs. She managed to change organ donation during the start of the campaign by over 250% sign-up. Jenna unfortunately didn't make it. She did pass away. She got her lungs, but she didn't, her body rejected them and she passed away. But every year on her birthday, the organ donation list shoots up again, leaving a legacy. This lady over here, Tone Johnson, 3 years ago, she realized that her community was quite dirty. She lives near the Henops River, and she was like, the Henops is terrible. I need to clean it. No one else is going to clean it. So she got her old dirty clothes on a Saturday, and she climbed into the river and started cleaning it. Community members saw what she was doing, and they were like, a little bit nuts. But I'm going to help her. That's the broken window theory. When we start to fix broken windows in our area, our neighbors will do the same. Cleaning pavements, cleaning up where we live. A couple of weeks ago, Taryn Johnson and her now proper NGO called Henops Revival celebrated removing and diverting 2 million kilograms of trash out of the Henops River. One woman, a simple idea that is literally cleaning up our world. So before I leave you, I'm gonna say this. I'm a pretty happy guy, pretty positive. There are some people that have come and said hi to me. They follow me on social media. Lift your spirits. That's not a natural state of being. I do it every single day. I change. I like to say that being happy, finding good news, being positive, changing the narrative is akin to hygiene. You have to shower every day to keep clean. You got to do the same thing with your mind. It takes work. Something that I learned during the pandemic, which has really changed my perspective on life, is I changed one word in my thought process. So in the morning when I wake up, before I have a cup of coffee, before I reach for my phone, before I do any of that, I think about what I'm going to do that day, what I have to do. But I've changed have to get. What do I get to do? Yeah, for some things, it might sound silly. I get to take out the trash. But for others, it teaches you to have gratitude for what you have. I get to see my family. I get to have a job. I get to stand up on stages and tell lacquer stories to make people feel good again. It makes you be lucky for what you have. And it really does change your state of mind. So I'm going to leave you with this. I started by saying in times of tragedy, we need to look for the helpers because they'll always be there. I'm not going to plagiarize that, but I am going to add to it. If you can't see a helper, can't find a helper, then it's your responsibility to become one. Because that's really how we change the narrative, not just for ourselves, but for the whole of South Africa as well. I want to thank you for letting me spend some time with you this morning. My name is Brent Lindeque, and I'm done.
This was the way, so appropriate to end our.
I hope no one's feeling much anymore.
No. and I think it's really just to add on, maybe for us, our members, is it starts with us. It starts with you as an individual, within your friendship, within your family, within your company that you work in, and within us as a SALDA association to change the healthcare sector for South Africa. I'm so emotional about it. I'm inspired because SALDA is going to change the healthcare industry of South Africa. Watch this space. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. I'm done. I think your meeting's done as well. Do you have any questions?
We're so energized. The meeting is done. Is there any questions that you've got for Brent or any comments, please? What did you do before you hand over to him?
So I've never been able to work for anybody. I've never been like that person. So at 21 or 22, obviously because I'm 29 now, I started a little brand activation agency. And at the time, many years ago, the concept was I got hold of a company in America that did digital photo booths. And there were none available in South Africa. So I partnered with them, I brought it in. The digital photo booth was great because at an event, you get the photo delivered to your email, but then the client really gets the data, is what they were looking for. So it's that phone number, the email address, you start to build on that. And one of my first clients was MTN, the gospel festival that they have. And I traveled around with them every month, we were doing different events. And then the same company gave me a thing called Flogos, so odd, a big black box. Inside that big black box was, it made foam, but the foam was created not with oxygen, with helium, and it was extruded through a stencil, and you created flying logos. And then I joined the Crickets, and I worked with Standard Bank for a couple of years, but it was an agency, so a brand activation agency. I'm no longer corporate, I can't. No, thank you.
Do you work for Brahmin?
Kind of. So, being on radio is different, right? Okay. So, it's a bit different.
So one comment from Bongi on the chat group says, thanks Brent for doing your bit in changing the narrative. # proudly South African indeed.
Thanks Bongi.
Any other comments or questions or?
Where do you go to from here?
So it's funny. I've done a bit of TV because I was with CNBC. I had a show every Friday night, which was really cool. I get to do some stuff with Espresso, and I thought that's where it needed to go. As the pandemic hit 2 years ago, my biggest thought is that I needed to be speaking to people that don't have access to data or to websites. I need to be speaking to the most hopeless in our country, because that's where the real problem lies, right? When you have a bit of money, you can still get through the day. When you can't feed your kids, it's a different story. And at the beginning of the pandemic, we wrote about a website that was 0 rated. So before the government realized that they needed to give information for free, there was a company that was formulated that did backwards advertising. So they got MTN and Vodacom to really pay for the website so that the news articles would be free. And we wrote about this with access to then COVID information. And this guy's website, the servers went down because of the amount of traction that he got from our article. And so he phoned me and he said to me, what the hell is going on? I need to understand. And then I explained to him what Good Things Guy was. And he said to me, we need to put your news on the site as well. So what I wanted to happen, to speak to those people, it happened. Where to from here? I have no clue. I think growth is amazing. I now write for News 24, sometimes Mail and Guardian, sometimes different publications. So I'm getting to speak to more and more people. I think maybe where the next step is some sort of action to really getting communities involved to change South Africa for the better. Because it's fantastic when I'm standing here speaking about it. But until we roll up our sleeves and we start to really get involved in South Africa, it ain't going to change. So maybe that's the next step from here. Done.
Awesome. Great. Thank you very much, Brent.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate
Thank you, everybody.